Hi, this is Sarah Toth, and I chose to do my research on phonological awareness for emergent readers. And the reason I chose to do this is because I work with students in grades K through 5 for enrichment and remediation. Working with students in kindergarten has given me a chance to see where they come in at the beginning of the year, the skills they have, and phonological awareness has been a big buzzword for me in the recent years. So my question was, do all students need phonological awareness? What happens to the students that don't have those skills that they need as reading increases? I wanted to know, is it phonological awareness? So I looked at my research trying to figure out how phonological awareness impacts emergent readers for early literacy skills and also for future reading. First of all, I'm just going to go over phonological awareness. There's a lot of terms and things that students do that are identified as phonological awareness. So this has made it difficult to kind of pinpoint what exactly students need to know, where exactly their growth is happening, and again, it can kind of skew the results. We can say their phonological awareness increased, but which aspect? So phonological awareness is a big umbrella term, and it encompasses listening. Can you hear different sounds? Can you rhyme words? Do you know what a word is? Can you identify different words? Can you identify syllables? Onset and rhyme, you know, b and at. The b is the onset, the at is the rhyme. That again goes with rhyming. And then you go into phonemic awareness, which is sometimes confused with phonological awareness. I like to say that phonological awareness can be done in the dark. Kids can manipulate the sounds of words without reading them. If they're able to have that knowledge and be strong in these things, then the thought is that they're able to do this better when text comes along. Now, phonemic awareness is also a part of phonological awareness. It's in that umbrella. And this really gets close to the reading skills. Can you blend words? Can you put the B and the at together? Can you tell me that it's bat? Can you take off the B and put on a C and tell me that it's cat? That's blending. That's adding, deleting, making new words. Also segmenting. Tell me which segment of the word is at. Show it to me. So a lot of wordplay here. It lends itself to his bottom-up theory that we learn to read sequentially, letter by letter, sound by sound, word by word. Then we get to our sentences, then we make meaning. However, you know, while there's a place for that, some students do need that explicit instruction. I believe that reading doesn't happen like that. You need to take top down and put it with the bottom up to get that interactive theory. So I use a lot of Rumelhart, even a little bit of Rosenblatt. You know, you have to make meaning. That's what the end-all be-all for reading is. So I have 7 study groups, I should say, and I'll go through the results relatively briefly and show you the positives, the negatives of them. The first thing I saw was RTI with Tier 2 instruction. And these were studies that actually identified their schools as having an RTI model with Tier 2 instruction. We see the growth here with the students that are struggling. The students who are low-level students, low-achieving students, or came up on screeners, they're the ones who are making the gains from getting that systematic, explicit instruction. Students who were, you know, average, above average, we didn't really see the growth in them, but maybe that's because they really didn't need this instruction to begin with. I went on then to my second study group, which is small group instruction. Again, not all schools identify this as Tier 2 with RTI. Now this was a pseudo-word study or a non-word study, basically make-believe words. Can you read a word phonetically? Now this showed great results in this small study. However, we have to look at it and say, okay, let's look at the students as a whole. Is non-word fluency really helping us to read? Is it really helping us to comprehend, to make meaning of the text like Rosenblatt would have liked us to? Not really. It's great that the students can read these nonsense words better than they could have, but again, this phonological awareness skill isn't showing us if the students were able to read. Also, a lot of study information was not given on the students, so we don't know if students truly needed an intervention or they just weren't good on this one aspect of phonological awareness. I then went on to look at more studies. I looked at phonological or professional development and program-based instruction. And professional development, again, is another big buzzword right now. It's something that is lacking within the studies. I saw that there's a little bit of professional development, but nothing consistent enough to show that the professional development made the results better or worse. Along with the program-based instruction, again, this is very similar to the Tier 2 type instruction I've talked about previously. This is, again, systematic instruction. We're going to use this type of program systematically. We're going to teach phonological awareness skills here in a Tier 1 fashion and a Tier 2 fashion. Again, we saw the best results from students who got Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction, and the best results were seen, again, with those low achieving students who are struggling. So they probably had a need for this. They showed the growth. On to my next study. This is my group 4. And these studies were really neat. If you look at my paper, those of you who have read it, you know, gave me great comments. Cool, interesting, I love this. These were different. And there's another study, another Tier 2 study previously that I had read. It's in my group 1, and they used Spanish and English instruction. And that was a big wow. Wow, I can't believe they did that. It was so different. Well, we saw those different approaches here in these art-based curriculums. The first study was on reading in motion. Now, I did a little bit of research on reading in motion, and it's not just a program, it's a highly funded program in the Chicago schools. A lot of funding, a lot of extra instruction, people to instruct. Again, this really is a Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. Students are getting 40 to 60 minutes of daily instruction, additional instruction. That's huge. So we're seeing an interactive approach here though. Not only are they getting the phonological awareness, they're also getting the story-based reading activities and putting the bottom up and the top down together. The results here were wonderful. All the students made growth. However, all the students were from very low socioeconomical statuses. They were probably students who all needed an intervention like this. Something similar was a music-based study, and students in this study were from different backgrounds. Now, we had a private school and a public school, and the private school used music instruction daily. They had a total of 3 hours and 40 minutes a week of music instruction, as opposed to the public school that had only 35 minutes. So again, we look at this and we say 35 minutes versus 3 hours and 40 minutes. Who's going to make more gains? Well, we did see more gains with the study that had that intense instruction. And they did show a correlation between music and early phonological awareness skills. They did a great job of showing this within their studies. Again, this just goes back to we need intensive instruction for students. And this takes me back to that study that I did with the Spanish-speaking students. We thought outside of the box. We did something different that worked for those students. So that, in these 3 studies, the previous one and these 2, we see teachers doing things that worked for the population that they had. On to ELL students, which ELL students are identified and they are consistently in the research coming up as having low phonological awareness skills. So we know that we need to practice with them, give them additional support. One study practiced phonological awareness versus story reading. And again, we saw that phonological awareness instruction improved their skills. While it is good to have that interactive approach, we can't implement new things until the students have the basis, those base skills, those phonological awareness skills. So in this case, students do need that bottom-up instruction. They need that systematic, skill-based instruction for these students, again, who are in that low achieving area. I did another study for ELL students. It was phonological awareness instruction. And then again, we see some Spanish instruction here. You're going to see, again, we saw better results with the students who are getting that again, English and Spanish. Many of the students were taught in Spanish in Head Start, so it just made sense to continue that on into kindergarten. Again, with the previous studies, when we're taking the students, looking at what they need, giving them that systematic, explicit instruction, we're seeing the results. Next, I focused on students who had language impairment, and I also looked at parental training. Constantly in the studies, you saw SLI, specific learning impairment. So these are students who receive a language service. Many of them have a special education, an IEP. They may be labeled as special education students, but because of SLI. Unfortunately, the research here wasn't that great. We talked about an online program, very bottom up, but a short type of program. I wonder if the researchers would take the program and make it longer, if we would see better results. Also too, if we paired this with some sort of teacher aspect for the kids to make, get clarification on their skills, would there have been better results? Unfortunately, the results just weren't there. 2 parental studies. One was with just phonological awareness skills, and one was with phonological awareness skills versus story reading skills. So the first study, and I have to correct myself, they did phonological awareness and story reading. So they did try to have that interactive approach, which was great. The other study with comparing a bottom up and top down, again trying to see what worked, but unfortunately we didn't see successful results here. I look at that, as sending this home to parents, that's great, but just a lack of support from parents. I would have liked to see some of these studies with maybe a speech and language pathologist, because they tend to be the person who works with students who have a specific language impairment. They have the most expertise. So really using them with this population, I think, would have showed us better results. However, these results weren't seen with students who had a language impairment or who had the language impairment and worked with parents at home to strengthen their skills. And the 7th study group I did was International Phonological Awareness Instruction. And I thought, should I put this in my paper, should I not? But I'm glad that I did. And I really saw a lot of similarities between what we do here in America versus other countries. Sometimes the names and tests are different, but they're still looking at the same skills. I was really happy to see that 2 of our studies focused on students who had a specific language impairment, and they did, some of the things that I just spoke about. They used speech and language pathologists, they used systematic instruction, and we saw that growth here. Another study was interactive, phonological awareness with story reading. Our interactive study did see results. Again, those students who got the most intense intervention saw the most results. Overall, I look at all my studies and I see common themes. The one common theme that I see is explicit, systematic instruction for low achieving students in phonological awareness increases their skills. phonological awareness is what they're lacking in. We need to give them a systematic way, teach them in a systematic way so they can improve these skills. The other impact I saw was with, again, I talked about this with the arts-based curriculum, teaching students with Spanish and English, basically tailoring our instruction to meet the needs of the students. So, after all this research, I'm going to go on into chapter 3, and at my school we have used a program called the 95% group. As an interventionalist, I have used this for the last few years. This kind of is where my curiosity came. I was saying, what's all this with this phonological awareness, you know, what are my real thoughts and feelings? So I wanted to research and learn some new things. I do like the 95% group program. However, using an intervention program and not having common language between classroom teachers is very difficult. When I see my students, especially in 1st and 2nd grade, and they've never had this language or done something like this, there's more of the teaching for the program than the teaching of the skill. So basically, we're having a new implementation, grades K through 5 for the 95% group. And this is to start with phonological awareness skills in kindergarten, continue on with phonics 1st and 2nd grade, finish up some phonics, some multisyllabic words in 3rd grade, and then go into word types, prefixes, suffixes, and then continue that on into 4th and 5th grade along with Anglo-Saxon words. So I do like that there's a continuum. It's systematic. Now, in future years, it will be nice to know a 3rd grader. They struggle with this in 2nd grade. They struggle with this in 1st grade. So this first year, we're just going to, you know, I'm going to be looking for how students do this year on some measures versus how they did last year on the same measures without having the 95% group implemented in a Tier 1 and Tier 2 aspect. So basically, 95% group is a manipulative-based program for grades K through 2, and that's where you see the manipulatives mostly in grades K through 2, and they're working on those phonics skills, those phonological awareness skills. They have a lot of maths, pictures for sorting. Once they get out of that phonological and they're hearing things, we go into the chips. There's red chips, blue chips, yellow chips, I think gray, purple, and orange. They all stand for something different. So the students get to know blue is a consonant, red is a vowel, and then it increases as they get to be older. But they're going to be using this kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and it'll just grow on itself as the students get older. 1st grade kindergarten will do phonological awareness, and then talk about, 1st grade talks about short vowels, long vowels, consonant digraphs. 2nd grade goes into predictable and unpredictable vowels and R-controlled vowels. With all this assessment, we want to see, is it really changing students' phonological awareness measures? Is it improving their reading? So I'm going to use the measures that my school already has in place, which are AIMS-Web and the DRA. So for kindergarten, we'll look at letter names and letter sounds throughout the year, and then we'll look at phoneme seg and non-word fluency that are introduced as the year goes on. Those same skills that we looked at in 1st grade, along with the RCBM, or their reading fluency, which is done at the end of the year. And 2nd grade, students will only be doing the RCBM just to see if they're able to fluently read and decode. The DRA, now those skills are done 3 times a year. Fall, winter, spring. And then the same, we're going to look at this DRA scores as well. They're given 2 times a year. Fall, and then spring. So the data will be collected by a team within the school. I help to give all of the AIMS-Web testing along with all the classroom teachers. It's myself and a few other teachers who are interventionalists. We work with the teachers to get all the kids tested. Teachers do the DRAs. Again, this is just something, it wouldn't be possible for me to do everyone's DRA to really see where they're at, but we have to take that, data with a grain of salt. So I'm going to collect the data, and I want to use it again just to look at last year's data, look at this year's data, and see if there is growth. I also would like to look a little more specifically at students who are in those remediation groups. Is it making more improvements for those low achieving students? Even look at students who are receiving ELL services and students who are receiving free and reduced lunch. And that concludes my paper, my research. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned something new. Thank you very much.